Honorable colleagues, honorable sénatrices et sénateurs,
Honorable Senators,
today on the unceded lands of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation to speak at third reading on Bill S-2, an act to amend the Indian Act, new registration entitlements. Tomorrow, December 4th, I will celebrate 8 years of being a senator. I remember that day well. Senator Mary Jane McCallum and I were being sworn in at the same time. I was extremely honored to be sharing that important rite of passage with such a remarkable leader, an accomplished medical professional who was committed to community-based care. She's a residential school survivor and a laser-focused, fierce advocate for Indigenous rights. We both carried eagle feathers into the chamber that day. Mine was given to me by our colleague and my neighbor and friend from Buktankek First Nation, now Senator P.J. Prosper, who was at the time Regional Chief of Nova Scotia and Newfoundland with the Assembly of First Nations. Thank you, Senator. Colleagues, you heard me refer to my long-standing membership on the Indigenous Peoples Committee in our debate on the committee report on Bill S-2. Although no longer on the committee in this very new Parliament, I attended some meetings on this bill, and with the help of my talented team, I've been following very closely, as it is an important government bill. Colleagues, I believe that thus far, we've had a very good, thorough, informative, respectful, and helpful debate on the Indigenous Peoples Committee report on Bill S-2. Thank you to my colleague, Senatrice Odette, for your leadership and for your wisdom and everything you have brought to this bill as the sponsor. I'd like to congratulate Minister Gulmasti for her important and appreciated work on this critical bill. Our Senate colleagues in the Office of the Government Representative, Senators Moreau, Laboucan-Benson, and Duncan, have supported us in our desire to fully debate this bill and have made very helpful contributions to that debate. Our hard-working Indigenous Peoples Committee members should be commended for your thorough work on the bill, and all colleagues who have entered in this historic debate. Your contributions shine a light on the variety of issues we will need to take into account as we move towards our final vote on Bill S-2 at third reading, and determine what it is we will send over to the House of Commons, the other place. In essence, the original bill restores entitlement to registration to individuals and their descendants who lost it through enfranchisement, often involuntarily. It gives First Nations individuals the power to remove themselves from the Indian register. Some will want to do that. It eliminates offensive language by replacing the term mentally incompetent Indian with the term dependent adult from the Indian Act. And it makes it easier for people, especially women, to rejoin the First Nation band of their birth. After 12 meetings, hearing from 62 unique witnesses representing over half of all 634 First Nations, and receiving 49 written briefs, the committee voted to amend the bill. The large majority of witnesses supported the original provisions of Bill S-2, but the majority advised the committee that it didn't go far enough. The amendments to the bill keep the core provisions of the original bill required to meet the purposes I just outlined. The main purpose of the amendments is to once and for all end the remaining discrimination in the Indian Act, and specifically the second generation cutoff rule. This is something that was called for in an amendment to Bill S-3, which was passed into law in 2017. New clauses were added to that bill, Bill S-3, in amendment related to consultations and reports. Article 8.1, bracket 1 states, the minister must, within 6 months of royal assent, initiate consultations with First Nations and other parties issues related to, by the provision of the Indian Act related to registration and band membership, including consultations, and it goes on to mention several. The third one is the second generation cutoff. That was 2017. The Senate Standing Committee on Indigenous Peoples 2022 report entitled Make It Stop, Ending the Remaining Discrimination in Indian Registration called for the Government of Canada to introduce new legislation repealing subsection 6(2) of the Indian Act, thus ending the discriminatory second generation cutoff. So, 2017, 2022. Colleagues, we've heard a lot about the need to give the minister and the government the time and space it needs to complete its constitutionally mandated consultation on the matter of the second generation cutoff, which is currently underway. One other amendment to Bill S-2, which was just mentioned by my colleague, which was passed by committee and this chamber in passing the report yesterday, is designed to address that very concern. The fourth amendment to Bill S-2 calls for a delay in the coming into force provision related to the other amendments, and that delay is of 12 months. This was agreed to in order to allow the minister time to complete the consultative work and introduce standalone legislation that could address any additional concerns. Honourable colleagues, like some others here, over the weekend, I reached out to our former Senate colleagues, the Honourable Lillian Dick and the Honourable Dan Christmas, after listening attentively to Senator Moreau's mention of them in his speech on the committee report last week. We had some good discussions. Colleagues, I know that every one of us takes our responsibilities to legislate, to represent, and to study, examine very, very seriously. As I started preparing these remarks today, I kept a mental image of Lady Justice, Justicia, carrying her balancing scales in her right hand. I found it helpful as I attempted to balance the relative substance, weight, and value of the various arguments and evidence for and against proceeding to pass the amended Bill S-2 with its enhancements. Honourable colleagues, I will just take a few minutes to outline what I have placed on the two sides of my scale of justice. And of course, my list is not exhaustive. On the side of don't pass this amended legislation and return S-2 to its original form, we have, one, we must allow for the constitutionally required consultation to be completed. The Senate needs to heed our constitutional duty. Committee amendments go beyond the scope of the bill. The House of Commons will likely reject the amendments, so don't waste time as there is a court-imposed deadline looming and people are waiting for this bill. Instead of amending this bill, the Senate should strongly instruct the minister to ensure a rapid conclusion of the consultation and that she should expeditiously co-develop a bill to address the second-generation cutoff problem. Accept the process and timeline provided in the letter from Minister Goldmasty and trust that the concerns covered by the amendments would be dealt with in a reasonable time frame by the government. Okay, that's on one side of the scale, and I'm sure there's more. On the other side, for argument and evidence to pass Bill S-2 as amended, I would place the following points. You cannot end discrimination incrementally. It hasn't worked, has it? Obligations under the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People create a statutory requirement to ensure that all laws of Canada are consistent with UNDRIP. Its articles refer to right to nationality and a right to belong to an Indigenous community or nation. The amended bill would be aligned with UNDRIP. Our own constitutional duties and roles as senators call us to scrutinize legislation, suggest improvements, fix mistakes, defend regional interests, and give voice to underrepresented groups like Indigenous peoples. Eliminating the two-tier system of entitlement to registration, i.e. belonging and benefiting, is urgently needed to stop the harms happening now on multiple generations. These include daily harms to children and others, and real documented threats to extinction of First Nations. All laws must comply with Section 15, equality rights, under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and Bill S-2 doesn't comply without its amendments. Consultation is a delay tactic. Despite political promises to the contrary, we heard that no consultation on Indian registration has ever resulted in voluntary legislative amendments to the Indian Act. To date, the 2017 and 2022 calls from the amendment to Bill S-3 and the APA Committee make a stop report for remedies for this second-generation cutoff discrimination have not had any result. You heard me mention in my exchange with Senator Moreau last week this serious issue of track record and trust. Colleagues, on looking to that balanced scale of Lady Justice, for me it tips in favor of passing this legislation with the amendments as passed by committee and expressing this chamber's desire for a fair, quick, thorough, and effective end of legislative discrimination under the Indian Act. Colleagues, I of course respect whatever your own conclusions are when you weigh those arguments and evidence. But I do hope that we will collectively take this important step in remedying the blatant injustices we have heard about, which are causing great harm to Indigenous children, to their parents, to communities, to Indigenous nations, and frankly, to our nation, Canada. Colleagues, this moment is an historic one. It is critical for our relationships, for reconciliation, for justice, and frankly, it is critical for human dignity. Walalio, thank you, merci.
Senator Ince, you have a question?
I do, ma'am.
Senator Coyle, will you take a question?
Happily.
Senator Ince.
Thank you, Senator Coyle. Very well spoken. My question simply is to you and my colleagues. Isn't this simply about human rights?
Senator Coyle.
Thank you for your question from my fellow Nova Scotian. Of course, it is about human rights. I wouldn't say it's simple, but it is about human rights, and I think it is about a fix, a remedy that has been put forward by a very thorough committee study, and was also voted on yesterday by this chamber, because I think all of us, the will of this House, is looking like it's tipping those scales in the way that it was tipping for me, which was, let's get this done once and for all.